What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video. And this week, instead of looking at a deck that is currently in the modern metagame, or at least having a pretty good hold of modern as we typically do when we go over modern decks, today I actually want to go over one that in the past, really before Modern Horizons 2, was one of the best decks in the format, and I would say was like Murktide before it was Murktide in terms of the share of the modern metagame that it held and the place that it did hold as one of the top decks to beat, and really not a lot of answers to answer it. So today we're going to take a look at Selenya Heliod for Modern and kind of see where the deck is now and pretty much find out why exactly it fell off the face of the earth when it did, because to me the deck still is very powerful and has the potential to be explosive. So let's go ahead and go over those things right now. Here we have this Selesnya Heliod deck. The latest one I could find was piloted by Alec Delaney, excuse me. 2-3 finish in the NRG series 15K showdown in Louisville. Obviously, 2-3 is not very good with the deck. Of course, we don't know the specific matchups that it played, but with what we're going to go over, we could probably surmise how the weekend probably went. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and do some shilling and shenanigans and all that fun stuff. Of course, if you like the video, of course, leave a like on the video, and of course, consider subscribing and ring the notification bell as well, so you know when I post new videos. Trying to post hopefully up to 3 or 4 times a week here, especially getting some momentum going into the new year, which is coming up a lot sooner than expected. A lot of good things hopefully to come in 2023. Now, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at Selesnya Heliod. For those not aware of what the deck is essentially trying to accomplish, this deck was kind of popular in Pioneer in its early infancy, not necessarily in the same exact way that the modern version is set up, but it was a combo that when Theros Beyond Death came out, it was very powerful. So essentially, you have two cards you want to set up. You have Heliod the Sun Crowned, and then you have Walking Ballista. Walking Ballista is an XX for a 0/0 construct. It comes into play with X +1/+1 counters on it. So if you pay 2 mana, it comes into play with 1 counter. You pay 4, comes in with 2, so on and so forth. You can pay 4 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on Walking Ballista, and then for free, you can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to deal damage to a target. It is important because we have Heliod the Sun Crowned, which says whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature or enchantment you control, and you can pay 1 and a white and give another target creature lifelink until end of turn. So essentially, you get a Walking Ballista into play, you give it lifelink with Heliod, and then as long as you have at least 2 counters on it, you remove one of the counters, ping your opponent for a damage, you gain life, trigger the Heliod, put the counter on the Walking Ballista, shoot your opponent, rinse and repeat until they are dead. This combo was very powerful for the obvious reason. You just had a way to deal infinite damage, which is a way that you can offset infinite life, which is a way that this deck could also win games because other decks at the time didn't have the way of dealing with infinite life. You have a card called Spike Feeder, if it would come up. You remove a counter from it, and you gain 2 life. You can also remove a +1/+1 counter, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, etc. Whatever. Obviously, with Heliod and Spike Feeder, you just have these in play. You remove the counter from Spike Feeder, gain 2 life, trigger the Heliod, you put a counter on the Spike Feeder, rinse repeat, you can gain as much life as you choose to do. And for the time, a lot of decks could not deal with an opponent being at 1 million life per se. There really wasn't anybody playing anything that could even come close to beating these decks when they assembled an infinite life combo besides the mirror match, besides other Selesnya Heliod decks, and they would have to assemble Ballista plus Heliod as well. So that is the name of the game. You have super fast starts where you can go like turn 1 Arbor Elf into turn 2 Utopia Sprawl into Collected Company, which Collected Company then can hit Heliod and then a Spike Feeder to go infinite. You can hit Heliod and Ranger Captain of Eos to get Walking Ballista, and from there you have your combo set up. You have Auriok Champion. Auriok Champion in conjunction with Heliod basically makes any creature enter the battlefield with +1/+1 counters. Conclave Mentor being a way to put multiple counters on creatures once they gain counters. And of course, the multitude of tips and tricks that I learned when playing this deck. This deck was very powerful. I remember playing the Modern Challenge whatevers for the Banner Traders series, and I think I won like 11 or 12 matches in a row before I just like stopped playing the deck, and like I decided to play Grixis Shadow for that tournament and completely just regretted it and would have rather played this deck. So what happened? Obviously, Infinite Life is still very good, but the problem that this deck runs into and ran into quite a bit as new sets came out, winning the game is a huge thing. You have two Walking Ballista. Walking Ballista is basically your main way of winning the game because you're able to play it and then hopefully leave up mana to just give it lifelink and shoot your opponent to death on that turn. Playing a Giver of Runes gives the deck just a tad bit of flexibility in being able to protect your Ballista or protect your Heliod the Sun Crown, especially while decks are playing a card that is very good against this deck, like Solitude. Solitude just being a card that you can essentially cast for free and interact with your opponent while also getting to tap out and do your thing is very, very good. Not to mention a card like Dress Down, which has been ultimately popular in blue decks, especially like the Murktide decks, so on, for a long time, and could literally have its own video on the different interactions and weird things that you think it might do, but it doesn't, and things that you don't think it would do, it does do. But again, with all that said, those two cards just being very commonplace in modern make this deck very hard to play. Obviously, Dress Down makes it so Walking Ballista cannot remove counters, or Heliod even gets to do its thing, as long as it is a creature. Spike Feeders, things, all these things just don't do anything. Another reason, Ranger Captain of Eos' sacrifice ability, you can sacrifice and your opponents cannot cast non-creature spells this turn. While there is some very good efficient removal in the format in terms of like Fatal Push, there's Unholy Heats, and even like Path's Exiles, Prismatic Omen, or Prismatic Endings, and things like that. What have you? The fact that Solitude is a card that exists is essentially removal that you can play and interact with your opponent. Same with Subtlety to an extent, obviously not as popular as Solitude, but nonetheless a card that you can pitch to end up countering a Auriok champion or countering a Heliod Walking Ballista, so on and so forth. On top of that, there is a few decks in the format, namely Hammer and Yogg, that have workarounds for beating decks that gain infinite life by being able to, in Hammer's case, deal infect damage to the opponent, a lethal amount to be exact, and Yawgmoth, of course, just being able to kind of like cycle its deck with endurances and sack and then just kill your opponent and deal tons of damage to them each turn, especially if you're able to keep them off of gaining even more life, because that's a way that you can beat infinite life after long enough. So with like all that said, it's kind of no surprise, but at the same time a surprise that this deck just fell off the face of the earth like it did. A lot of games where you just played like turn two collected company off of the previous plays that I had mentioned at the beginning of Arbor Elf plus Utopia Sprawl, and just going into full combo and on Moto gaining like 800 life, and if your opponent ended up actually dealing with it, just getting to go essentially go infinite, go even higher to kill your opponent, eventually with a Walking Ballista. So yeah, that's Selesnya Heliod. That's kind of a summarization of what happened to this deck. The removal got better, and some of the answers that I had for the removal, because even before the removal was very good. The you know the ways to protect it and play against those things just aren't nearly as good as the ways to keep things like this in check. So knowing all of that, that is the unfortunate end for Selesnya Heliod. A deck that's probably still pretty good. I would imagine that playing against like forward color control is probably miserable. Probably trying to set up against burn is not all that great because if you don't have like Auriok champion, your creatures are just kind of bad against like their burn spells and their creatures and things like that. Also with Murktide and Hammer being 20% of like the meta or 21% of the meta, those decks just have ways to interact with this deck in different ways. Murktide having the counter spells, the removal spells, and getting to put a quick lock on your opponent, and Hammer just getting to beat through Infinite Life is pretty big game, honestly. And when 1/5 of the decks that you're going to play against are going to be pretty bad matchups, such as that, that's no surprise that people have kind of moved off this and either playing those decks or just playing other decks in Modern that have a better matchup against the more common decks in the format. So yeah, that is Selenya Heliod for Modern for probably the third time in this video because I have a very bad habit of ending and then having more things to say. I just ramble off. My mind goes completely off and just wants to give as much information as possible because I love doing these videos and it's just I have fun doing this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's gonna do it with me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Of course, if you did, leave a like on the video, and please, please, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you know when I post new videos. Trying to up the amount of times that I post per week, and constantly failing, but still trying to stay strong with the 2 or 3 videos a week that we get. So that's gonna do it with me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.